Hi, my name's John. I'm from Virginia, and I'm just here to tell you about my son's dream when he was 4.5. His name's David. Anyway, my son, when he was about 4.5, yeah, he early in the morning he came downstairs and was waking me up, and he said, "Daddy, Daddy, I had a dream last night that I went to the special place." And I was like, "What do you mean special place?" He's like, "Heaven." Oh, okay. Um, and then he went in to tell me. I was like, "Well, how did you get to go to heaven?" Because I asked God. And I was like, "Okay." So he's like, "Yeah, I was upstairs praying before I went to sleep, and I asked God to show me heaven." And I just kind of started telling him about, God and Jesus and stuff. And so heaven was maybe barely mentioned at some point. So he's like, "Yeah, I prayed, and when I prayed, these two angels showed up in my room, and they started waving their arms in big circles, and it made a tornado. And out of the tornado came a hand with a hole in it, and it grabbed my hand, and next thing I was standing before God, and God was really big, and I was afraid. But God said, 'Do not be afraid, for I am your heavenly Father.' And Daddy, I wasn't afraid anymore." And he said, "I was standing next to Jesus, and Jesus and I were standing, and there was this gigantic gates in front of us with a big city inside, and the gates were as tall as a skyscraper. And we went in, and Daddy, I could see our house, and our house was really clean because ours could use some work." And I was like, "Okay." So he's like, "In the house were a bunch of people, like they were waiting for me, and one of them was a skateboard friend that you knew when you were a kid, asking about you." I was like, "Wow, that's pretty interesting," because I did know a kid who I got to witness to when I was younger, who ended up getting killed at a party, and he'd accepted Jesus just before that. So I was like, "I hope that's him," thinking in my head. So he went on to tell me more details. He said in the backyard, our dogs were there. So we used to have 3 dogs that he remembered when he was little. They had passed shortly after. And so he got to play with them. And then he said, next thing he was with Jesus, and he could see, I think he saw kids playing like hide and seek and other games and playing with animals. Um, and he said he played hide and seek with Jesus. Uh, and then next thing, he was brought before a big water next to a forest where he was playing hide and seek, and uh, it was clear and it was full of fish and there was sharks in there. And he said the sharks were really nice. He could swim with them, and it was like he didn't have to breathe. And then when he came out, he said there was a big tree next to the water that had every kind of fruit on it. And he said God told him to eat some of the fruit, so he did. And he said there was a yellow trash can next to the tree. And he said when you eat the fruit and you drop it in the trash can. And I said, "Was it made of gold?" He's like, "Uh huh." And so then he said he saw King David. So he went over to King David and he said, "My name's David." And so David showed him, he said it was like watching TV, the whole story of him with Goliath. And he said, "I saw Goliath, and he grabbed 5 stones and put them in a pouch. But when he was fighting Goliath, Goliath cut the pouch open, and it was just 1 stone left. But he slung the stone and threw it, and it hit Goliath right here in the middle of the head, and it stuck halfway in, and Goliath fell. And then he went on to talk to different people like Moses and Noah, and he was shown the beginning of time with Adam and Eve and the creation of the world, um, up to the present time and even some of the future. So he was telling me all these different details that he was seeing and hearing about. And at one point he's like, "Daddy, I saw myself as tall as you, and which he is taller than me now. And we were surfing together, and because I like surfing. So he's like, and God was letting me surf up in heaven. And he said, as I was catching a wave and riding this big wave, he woke up and he was standing in a surf pose. And that's when he came downstairs to tell me. So, my advice is if your kids come down and tell you an interesting dream, just go ahead and hear them out, humor them, and you might be surprised at what you hear. Alright? Thanks for listening.